is no antidote. There 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 is no antidote.
Hello, peculiars. I am excited partly because I'm wearing a very small hat. And I'm wearing a small hat because I have very small hair at the moment. And I would like to have less small hair eventually, but it's going through a phase. So anyway, I'm wearing my small hat. I've got my little, this is for holding my glasses during the day, so I don't look like as much of a nerd as I am with like the little chain that hits your glasses. Because tonight we are going to get information about misinformation. And I'm excited. Are you excited, Davey?
I am excited. What a both fascinating and terrifying book. What?
Yeah. Yeah, kind of.
Oh.
And you know, like I feel like I did the 100 years ago history and now here's everything. Well, actually this does tons of history too, which I was not expecting, and that was really
Right.
cool. The Ben Franklin thing, who knew?
Frankly, there were moments where I was like, let's just stay in the history where it's safe.
Yeah,
Not
I
talk
know.
about present day.
Like, no, don't take us to the future. So anyway, we have Annalee with us today. And what's great is this is the second time, but as usual, right? The second time you have someone, it's even better. So without further ado, welcome to Annalee Newitz.
Hello. Thank you for having me back. I'm really glad that the second time is going to be better. It's like the rare that outperforms the original.
It almost always does. Also, like, we're excited because we've added things since the last time you were here. And so now, like, there's a song. There's going to be a song, and there's a cocktail. Well, we've had cocktails, but this one is just for you. So yeah, it's going to be awesome. And we have all kinds of people here tonight. I see Kristen Meston. She like blew it. She's like, whoa, barely made it. Just slid in from Seattle. Randy's here, and Sureka was with us in the green room. She's here as well. Kristen, hi Annalee. So glad you keep writing new books, she says. It looks like Leanne's actually back in Virginia too. She's been away and back again, and a couple people on their way to concerts. Sadie is headed to see Yola Tango, and Bonnie, Amigo the Devil. I don't know that one, but it sounds like my vibe, actually. Kind of.
Sounds good.
It does.
I have
We
friends
should
that
all
were...
be befriending the devil at this point, I feel like.
I have friends that were just in New Orleans. They're like, oh, we went to this vampire bar. I was like, you know who would love that?
You know exactly who would love that. We were looking at doing the Edgar Allan Poe speakeasy night. Did you see it? It's going to be in Ohio again. I should, yeah, it's going to be in like Marion, Ohio, or I don't know, somewhere, Medina, something. And they basically perform short versions of Edgar Allan Poe stories while giving you successively stronger cocktails. So I feel like, it's a perfect night, really.
Yeah.
No, it sounds like you.
What could be better?
Yeah, staying in Medina, maybe. So it's exciting to have you on here. Now, I have to say, it was revealing to have, because I didn't read your book until after I'd finished mine. And of course, mine is also not quite about the same thing, but yet there were some really interesting affinities. Reading your book is scary in the same way that writing my book was.
Yeah, it is like that process of going back into history and seeing how much we are echoing some of these same authoritarian tendencies in the present day. But also, if I may speak about your book briefly, one of the things that I found so incredible about it was that some of the internecine debates among progressives and among people like on the left are still being replicated too. So we're still having the same fights about how to push back against authoritarian tendencies. And that is depressing.
It is. All the siloing too, like the fracturing of different groups being like, well, no, community, like just let's all fight them. Let's all fight them.
And not get fragmented. Yeah.
Yeah. And it just keeps happening. But I wanted to know, this is just a totally personal question from writing my book. I spent so many hours lying on my floor crying. How many hours did you spend lying on your floor crying? Because when you're writing a book like this, right?
It's hard. I mean, and I've told people a lot about how this is definitely the hardest book I've ever written.
Same.
It was incredibly depressing. And I mean, because there is a lot of stuff that I didn't know. And I didn't realize how kind of terrible things had been in ways that were extremely recognizable to me.
Yeah.
And I was incredibly depressed after I wrote it. And I would do things like, when I was working on really hard chapters, I would try to get out and like sit in nature. And like at one point, like a chipmunk sat on my toe when I was like writing one of these chapters. And I was like, okay, that's good, but still genocide. So, it's hard.
I suppose a weird kind of hope that came out of my book, which I also feel resonates with me when reading your book, is for most of us without history, we would just assume this was the worst, like it had never been this bad. And instead you look at history and go, no, it's way worse. Like, which, okay, that's bad because it could get worse. But also it reminds us that we've beaten these demons before. You know, we've fought this ground before. The fact that we have to keep fighting it is super fucking annoying, but we can do it. And so I took hope from it, but I just wondered, like, because there were a lot of Snickers bars and like, like lying on the floor, eating Snickers bars and drinking wine and crying. And I just, which has now become a part of my regular process, I think, of writing.
I mean, I feel like for me it was Cheesies, but yeah, same idea, like, and now
Cheesies, like Cheez-Its or
no, Cheesies, the Canadian treat, which are like Cheez-Its like perfected. So if anyone out there has not encountered this Canadian subspecies of the Cheeto, cheese, they are sexier, crunchier, and made with real cheese. Allegedly, more real cheese.
This is amazing. This is so good.
Yeah, I think that like there is a hope in looking back at history and looking at how people have fought these battles before. And there's a sense of solidarity that you get knowing that there are ancestors back there who worked really hard to make things better for us so that we would have the resources to fight again. But boy, is it frustrating. Cheesy.
Oh, sorry, I was a little slow. My computer was throwing up some error messages.
I'm so glad that you made that appear. Yeah, please don't buy them from Amazon, obviously. When I was living in Canada for a couple months earlier this year, and at all of the grocery stores, there's these big displays of Cheesies. Much better than Cheez-Its, Bonnie.
Yeah.
There were these big displays of Cheesies, and it was like, buy Canadian. And I was like, with pleasure.
Well, I will say, for anybody who's interested, I discovered a place called My Pannier, which is a Canadian company who specializes in shipping good things to Americans who can't get them in other ways. So mypannier.com, and I have the ways and means. I also have friends in Canada who will send things to me, which is also handy.
I get up there often enough that I feel like I get enough. I get my annual amount of Cheesies supplied.
I'm within driving distance. I'm in Cleveland, and Toronto's just there. I frequently stock up on alcohol as well.
I mean, whatever you can get. Yeah. Like Cheesies, and Hawkins, of course, is the manufacturer of Cheesies, very important Canadian brand. So
yeah. I see a couple of questions that I've starred already, but I wanted to throw up Kristen's comment here.
Yeah.
Kristen Meston says, this is a double-edged sword thing. We can definitely beat these problems, but apparently never permanently. And I think that has, that is definitely a frustrating thing.
For me, I think that has been the most shocking element of having studied all of this history and then obviously lived through the second iteration of the Trump regime, which is that the whole time I was growing up, we were taught that like things are getting better, like there were the bad old days, but now we have, feminism and civil rights and abortion and all this kind of stuff. And I really took it for granted. Like I'm a Sesame Street kid. Like I grew up thinking like we're becoming more diverse, we're becoming more feminist, all this kind of stuff. And realizing that in fact, I don't know if the arc of history bends toward justice. I think that it's more of a tug of war, and that we're always in that tug of war. And if we place our faith in justice always winning, that we forget that we actually, the only way that justice wins is if we are vigilant all the time.
If we're fighting that battle. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's a little bit like Magnus Hirschfeld saying, through science to justice. Like, the problem is RFK Jr., right? Like,
the problem is science is used against us. You know, science can be appropriated by, by pseudoscientists, by, conservatives. We have scientific racism, which I talk about a lot in my book.
Right? Yep.
And it's
I feel like our books shake hands in ways I wasn't anticipating when I sat down to read yours. I was kind of like, okay, all right, like, high five or low five or sad five or sad five.
Sad five. But I think that this impulse that both of us had to look at present day political struggles and then say, where does this come from? Like, what are the roots of this? I think that's something that is very potent. And it's potent because right now, this repressive regime that's in charge of the United States is pushing people to not look at history. So that if they're saying, don't pay attention to history, close down your local library, that's how you know that you should go to the library and study history.
They're like, wait, what do you not want me to see here?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, because I always end up diving right in and then forgetting to do the announcements, we're going to do the announcements real quick. Also, because I have to show you this amazing drink that Kat made. So that's another reason. All right. So first of all, you can meet us on socials. Just in case you just found us by accident today. We have a website. It is peculiarbookclub.com. And there you will find all kinds of juicy, wonderful, interesting things, including our Facebook group. We are not, in fact, on Twitter anymore. We're on Blue Sky, and Blue Sky is better. YouTube, all the podcasts, Discord, Goodreads, bookclubs.org. I mean, we're everywhere you want to be.
We need to update that logo, I think.
I know.
Annalee, I think you need to update your website too, because there was like a Twitter link, but then I saw you didn't post. And I was like, yes. And then I was like, on Blue Sky. I was like, she's there.
I need to change that to a Blue Sky link. Exactly, that's so funny. I didn't realize that I still had that on there.
But they didn't have the little butterfly for a long time. Yeah, there wasn't a good logo to use, which was frustrating.
To just have the Twitter logo and then have it just take you to Blue Sky,
which is kind of awesome in its own right. Yeah, it really is. Okay, so that's where you can find us. In addition, you can support us on Patreon, and we really appreciate that. We have our big annual fundraiser for members in the winter, but we also have these amazing monthly members, and you're actually helping us be able to plan for things and pay Davey, which is nice, and our musicians and other folks. And so really, it's truly appreciated. You guys are awesome. Watch us on YouTube. The YouTube channel now also has shows that are upcoming in addition to shows that are past, which is super helpful. You can join our group chats. You can join us on Discord. You can read what we're reading, bookclubs.org and Goodreads, and the podcast, which has kind of grown exponentially. And somehow I decided to do 1 million of these in July. So there's all kinds of podcasts coming up as well. Poor Davey is trying to get through them all right now. Whoops.
We'll make it.
Newsletter. I have decided that I'm really enjoying writing these little funny blurbs at the beginning of the newsletters. These are probably going to get longer. I'm probably going to start writing little fiction stories and bedtime stories and shit. So you should subscribe to the newsletter because it gets better every time. Also, you learn about us. I hope that's the right link. More about Peculiars, supporting Peculiars. Super cool. Get all the VIP shows. By the way, Mary Roach is joining us September 11th. We originally thought we were going to have Sam Keene. Sam couldn't make it. And guess who decided to step in? Mary Roach. So we are having this amazing show. Don't forget about that. That's a VIP show too.
Mary Roach, of course, the original Peculiar.
The original Peculiar.
The original author, yeah.
That's right. Oh, and the book cocktail. Okay, I have to admit, the names were really fun for this one. One of them was Some Like It Psyop, and I did vote for that one. But the one that won was Spicy Propaganda. And this was Kat came up with this one because, you know, when it's hot, and it's hot everywhere. I think I saw that Amanda posted that she's melting in Utah. Sour stuff is more refreshing. So this is a beer cocktail that it's like a beer cocktail, but also kind of like a Bloody Mary, but also kind of like a margarita, all had like a threesome and gave you this. So it's very tasty, and it's also a little bit sour. And it's called Spicy Propaganda, and it's for you, Annalee, just you. This is for your book.
Hooray. This is amazing. I'm glad that it's like blood red too. That was very important. Spicy and bloody. Yep, that's
bloody.
Perfect.
All about
propaganda warfare. Yeah.
After months of you being like, can we see the photo bigger? I was like, I'm just gonna make the photo bigger. Like, I'm just changing the graphic for this.
You know what? I appreciate it, Davey. Yeah. You're on the ball there.
Well, I'm not on the ball for our peculiar movie club. Whoa, what a transition. So our June episode still hasn't come out yet. In honor of Brandy's book, we're doing Milk. I might watch it tonight. Yeah, just life and things.
Life
and
things.
The thought of like sitting down and watch a whole movie is literally daunting at this point. So we are going to be doing Milk still for Brandy's. The story's not going anywhere. We'll discuss it. The themes aren't going anywhere.
Damn true.
And then for Annalee, for your book, we thought we would do a movie with some misinformation in it, maybe a political system working to spread some misinformation. So we're going to do Wag the Dog.
Wag the Dog.
Dustin Hoffman, Robert De Niro. That'll be our July episode. If it comes out in July, hopefully. We still have like 2/3 of a month left. So we got to be able to
absolutely. But also, like, you know, I used to have Christmas in July. I feel like, you know, the podcasts are happening. They're happening.
This is also one of those 90s movies that I just never watched in the 90s, and it was always on DVD shelves, and I was like, yeah, I'm sure it's funny, but I never bought it. So it's always fun to watch a movie we've never seen before.
I love it.
Yeah. All right, those are our announcements.
And I just see what else. Why does my chat say hi instead of hi? What is happening?
I think we know what's happening there.
Hi, everyone.
I mean, it's almost 4:20 here in San Francisco, so you've got the right idea.
I like it.
I apologize. My cat is kind of talking in the background. I'm going to just let her out. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Sorry.
We can stall for a second.
We're all about that. My cat.
I was going to say, if anyone listens to my baseball podcast, I know you guys aren't the exact crowd for Cleveland Guardians baseball podcast, but the babies were screaming on the baby monitor like while I was recording.
Action cat.
So my podcast listeners got to listen to a baby screaming in a monitor while I was recording.
But it's about baseball, and I feel like if you're from Cleveland, you do a lot of screaming and crying when the sports balls of various types are on TV. So you do, yeah. Okay, so I have seen some questions go up, and I'm going to go up and catch them, and then you guys can continue typing. Always a reminder, if you're watching the show, there's a little bit of a delay, so always get in there and get on it, because it'll take a minute to matriculate through to me. Randy Trent said it's 4:20 somewhere. Very nice. But I'm going back up here. So I guess this isn't exactly a question, but Leanne said, what I'm grateful for is that I now have a grand overview to tie in all these weird and disturbing news reports and fake news. I can at least integrate it so I can understand it. And I think that's really, really true, because I had always, to return to the Native American, the sort of indigenous populations and how they were treated. I am partly indigenous, and my great grandfather was actually sent to a breaking school, right? Like a de-Indian school kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And so I knew bad stuff had happened, and I knew I didn't read about it in history books, but I still kind of thought it was a sin of omission until reading your book.
Yeah, I mean, it was a concerted effort on the part of the U.S. government. I mean, it was a very widespread propagandizing program. And, often these schools were called residential schools. I like breaking school. I think kidnap school is another, great way to think about it.
I think that's what my grandfather called it, was a breaking school.
Yeah, because these were incredibly, for most people, these were very abusive places. There are reports from, folks who actually found them helpful. Those are very rare. But what happened was the U.S. government really wanted to do essentially what the US government is doing now by separating children from their families. It was a way of undermining the morale of the indigenous nations and tribes that were fighting against the US government during the Indian Wars. And it was also one of the things I think that's important to remember is that these residential schools where the US military would take children away from indigenous families and put them in these boarding schools, many of which were Christian schools, sponsored directly by churches, many also sponsored directly by the government. But the goal was partly propaganda, of course, against indigenous people, but it was also propaganda that white people were telling each other because they wanted to, how do you get white people who think of themselves as liberal or as, enlightened to buy into just wholesale slaughter of indigenous people? How do you, what kind of a story do you invent to say, no, we're not killing these people. Yeah. We are helping them. We are bringing them into our glorious culture. And so kids would be brought to these schools, forced to learn English, or forced to speak exclusively in English, forced to adopt Christianity, but also forced to adopt a lot of other kinds of Western values around how you should live, how you should farm, just absolute kind of culturally eradicating their connection to their ancestors and to their own traditions. And of course, the results were terrible. I mean, a lot of these kids were really horrifically abused. Or they just simply felt alienated from their own cultures, and they felt alienated from the white settler culture. So it left these sort of stateless kids really adrift. But the thing that's so interesting is, and I talk about this in the book, is you can read these accounts, especially in the later 19th century when tons of government money was going to these schools, where basically there were these groups that were kind of like the TED Talk groups of that era, where like very educated white men would be brought together and with captains of industry and, with clergy, and they'd have these meetings where they would talk about the good things they were doing in the world. And these residential schools were high on their list of things to give money to educate these poor kids, allegedly poor kids. And so you can see a direct reflection of this kind of approach to propaganda happening right now in the United States. Yes. In states where the government is taking over education and is saying, we know what's best for kids. They should not be exposed to any history about the enslavement of African Americans, the genocide of indigenous people. They should not be exposed to any positive imagery of LGBTQ people. And that's, they're not literally kidnapping kids, but kids are forced to sit in school all day and learn what the state thinks that they should learn. And I think that just over the last year since this book has come out, like more and more people have started talking to me about that and saying like, oh, now I see where that came from. And it's like, it's something that what we did, it's what white settlers did to abolish to sort of undermine our enemies. And now we're doing it again.
And of course, all the things that happened in Berlin were also very similar. What's fascinating in my book is that Magnus Hirschfeld doesn't even really think of himself as Jewish exactly until after he's attacked by Hitler, because he had grown up in Berlin and had been assimilated. And he actually said at one point, I quote it somewhere in the book, that where he was sort of like, this is a very dumbing down, but like Hitler made me Jewish. Like I wasn't standing for my people. Now I am, because now I'm realizing that I'm in this camp. But I thought, wow, that's amazing, because the erasure. And actually, my grandfather who escaped, or great grandfather who escaped and left and managed to get away by working in a shantytown mining camp, never mentioned anything about his culture ever, and we were never to speak about it. So in a way, we got erased anyway. Like even if it wasn't beat out of you, do you know what I mean? It kind of is taken from you in other ways.
Yeah, I think people don't realize how much scapegoating involves both, kind of perpetrating stereotypes about a group as well as erasing the group. and it's simultaneous, right? That your group is completely ignored. And this happens all the time with trans people right now, where it's like, there's all of these stereotypes about who trans people are, and yet no actual real life trans people are permitted to speak about themselves in the mainstream media.
Right.
And this is what happened with Indigenous people in the 19th century. I mean, it still happens now, where
it still happens. Yeah.
I will still talk to like white settler types who will be like, oh, well, there's no Indigenous people who live in California. And I'm like, are you insane? Like, can you, anyway, I shouldn't accuse them of insanity, but like, I'm just like, are you a fool? Like,
right. No, I get it. But it's we're looking at the media with one eye. Amanda Johnson said states have been doing that for such a long time, creating a story that fits the white supremacy narrative. I keep thinking about how the Mountain Meadows massacre was framed in my Utah history books. Which,
I mean, it is, revisionist history it's part of the American way. And that was what was so fascinating for me researching this book, was realizing how much of American history has been about erasing history and cherry picking history. And, and there are these kind of moments where a bunch of kind of educated people, historians, will get together and kind of change the consensus on what history is. And sometimes they change the consensus so that we include the voices of people who've been marginalized, and sometimes the other way. Yeah. And right now we're in the white settler narrative is becoming the only narrative that's permitted.
Right. Unless you're a white settler from South Africa, apparently. So Sureka asked a question. She said, I'd love to hear you come to choose. I'd love to hear, I think, how you came to choose the book's examples. In what order did you come across them, and how did each one change how you thought about the ones you'd already selected for the book? And this is an author question, which I'm an author too. It is a thing. Like, I know when I was researching my book, I thought everything everywhere all at once is happening. Like, how do you figure out what to talk about, and then as you find more stuff? So it's a good question.
I mean, it actually it is a very writer question, because especially when you're writing nonfiction, and of course I also write fiction, so it's not really as much a fiction question, but you do have to, you can have the greatest thesis in the world, but if you don't have good examples to show your thesis, nobody cares, and it's just an opinion. It's not actually evidence-based. And so I think the thing that took the longest with this book was, having a hunch about how propaganda worked. And I had done a lot of initial research on psychological warfare and talked to folks in the military and learned about how psychological warfare worked. And I had this hunch that it had jumped over into culture war, but I really did spend a lot of time talking to sources, interviewing people, figuring out what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to have what I called 3 case studies in the book, where I look at, the ways that Black people have been targeted by psyops in culture war, how feminists have been, and how LGBT folks have been, because those are kind of ongoing American stories, and also Indigenous people, of course. And that's a huge part of the 19th century history in the book, is about targeting Indigenous people, both with kinetic warfare and with psychological warfare. So then it really came down to finding those examples. And somebody actually mentioned Wonder Woman in the comments, and I have to say, I
saw that
was one of the examples that I knew I was going to have from the get-go, because
that was Kristen Meston saying, my mind was blown when reading about the backlash against Wonder Woman.
I had been I knew about, Frederick Wertham, the psychologist who became kind of an influencer who was trying to censor comics in the 50s and 60s. I knew about his career. I knew about the targeting of Wonder Woman. And I also knew, because I'm always excited to read about polyamorous people in history. So I knew about the creation of Wonder Woman and the family behind it. And so that was the example that was for sure going to be in there. And also it's a great kind of double-edged example, because it's about how do you create kind of counter narratives, and how do you also counter narratives that are sticky and popular. And, when you create those kinds of narratives, they kind of get out of your control, right? Like Wonder Woman means a lot of things to a lot of people. She's not just a feminist icon.
No, and it's morphed over time. I'm going to just throw up, Anthro Girl was mentioning another comic talking about watching the HBO show Watchmen and seeing the Tulsa massacre scene and being like, no, that didn't happen in history. We would have learned about it,
Yeah.
But no, you don't learn about these things. And comics are a really fascinating. Comics are counter narrative so much of the time.
Yeah.
Well, they used to be. It's odd because now we're in a place where the comics industry has become an industry. And so
it always has been. And I think a lot of, the ways that comic books were counter narratives, it was subtext, right? Even with Wonder Woman, like you wouldn't necessarily, if you were reading Wonder Woman in the 40s, you wouldn't necessarily have picked up on the fact that it was a feminist narrative if you didn't want to, if you wanted to see yourself in it, of course it would have been incredible. It was incredibly empowering. But with the Watchmen thing, by the way, that's not in the comic book. That's just in the TV
it's just in the TV
version of the comic book. Such an incredible example, though, of how sometimes fiction can be a more effective vehicle for telling true stories than nonfiction. And that's part of what I was trying to deal with in Stories Are Weapons is how do you make your way through that kind of space between fiction and nonfiction, which is the realm of persuasion? How do you tell an emotional story about something real without like kind of losing sight of what's real? And I think that particular episode of Watchmen with the Tulsa massacre really was incredibly effective. And I do know a lot of white people mostly who were like, holy shit, like I had no idea. And it's like, good. Like good, now you know.
But it's also, I think, so this is why stories are weapons, because they are weapons that we can use against the bad stuff, and they're weapons that are used against us too. And it's I think that fact and truth are really interesting things, because truth is not always fact and fact is not always truth. And so that's another interesting kind of intersection that I saw in your book. But there's more questions, and you guys can keep writing questions, but it is the halftime of our show, and that means we have music. And actually Susan of the Bushwick Book Club, who did this song, and you guys know she's been with us enough that now she's a small person in the intro, it was really excited and actually sent a lovely message for me to forward to Annalee about how good the book was. So
yeah, that was really nice. Thank you so much.
Enough.
I love Susan.
That was
she was really,
incredible.
really moved. Yeah. She's so great at, getting to the heart and the sort of spirit of the things that she does. And I was really pleased with that one.
That was just, wow, really incredible.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, Kristen's like, so we get to cry while reading the book and during the
I was getting kind of choked up. So I was kind of like, okay, this is fine.
Yeah, she has an effect on people. I want to, so that we have a couple different things that have popped in here. Another one from Sureka and a couple more. Mindy had pointed out, whoops, where'd it go? Oh, and there's Susan. Says, thanks so much for your book.
Thank you for your awesome song. Holy crap.
No, wonderful. Mindy said, X-Men does a great job of this too, with their storylines about othering and persecution. And I just picked up Anthro Girl saying, but here's one of those things, right? Most people root against the Empire in Star Wars. They root against the Capitol in Hunger Games. And yet, how does that translate? Does it translate, into real life? It seems sometimes like the very people who are like, yeah, I'm with the Rebel Alliance, will turn around and not be.
Yeah, I mean, there's many answers to this question. And I think one of the big answers is something that's really difficult, which is that when you create a story, obviously people are going to take from that story what they want. And so you can have someone identify with the rebellion who is genuinely like a marginalized person who's having their, head crushed under the boots of fascism. And you can have a fascist identify also with the rebellion, because we all feel like we're fighting against a systemic problem, right? So that's the difficulty of something especially like Star Wars, for instance. And I think you can't write a story or experience a story and expect everyone to get the same meaning out of it. And oftentimes, if a story is too preachy about what the meaning is, we don't really like that story. It's not really very fun to read or watch or experience. And so I think that what the value of stories is, if we do want to, enter into that realm, the culture war is made up of stories. And so partly we need to be aware that some of what we're encountering is storytelling, so that we can understand that it's fictional. We can resist its pull. We can say, okay, I know that this is tugging at my heartstrings, but the direction that it's tugging me is toward, kicking immigrants out of the country. So you can kind of, see through how you're being manipulated. But the other piece of that is that a lot of times stories are not, when they're helpful, like something like Wonder Woman, she's not helpful because she's telling people to vote for a particular person or join a particular movement. She's just saying, as a character, hey, I see you. You are a woman who is independent, who doesn't want to be a housewife, who's not a trad wife, who wants to be, living with other women in solidarity. And you're real. I know you're real. And it's so important because we were saying before, part of what scapegoating does is it erases us. Yeah. And we feel like, wait, am I real at all? Am I just, have I lost my mind? And it's when you see a story and see yourself in it, you're like, okay, I am real. I can keep going. Yeah.
And that's what that's why representation is so important. And this is why, stories are such important positive weapons too, in their way, and I think about, I'm autistic. I wrote my mystery novel with an autistic protagonist who says she's autistic, because most of the time in books and film and TV, right, it's just somebody's quirky and you have to read them that way. And I thought, well, you're just inviting people to define this person, which is part of the problem of being autistic in the first place. And so I wanted to create a representation for that, but it's not
where they self-identify. Yeah.
Right. But it's also but you put something out in the world and people can read it any way they want. They can do what they want.
That's why I really think it's a dangerous game to really try to, once a negative story is out there, once a story is out there manipulating people to scapegoat a particular group, that I advise in Stories Are Weapons, you can't really argue with that. You can't, once somebody is propagating fiction about you, you've become a fictional character. And so you can try as hard as you want to be like, no, this is who I really am. And it's like, no, I know who you are. You're in my story now. So that's what I always say, like, tell a different story. Just change the subject. Like, do not engage with their story. Tell another story.
Right. Leanne said, why are there some people, for instance, who enjoy tricking and manipulating others? And I know they're out there because I've met them, and I think some of them might be in my family.
I think, again, this is really complicated because a lot of the people who engage in psychological operations, like as a professional career, like in the military, or say they work in advertising, which is another kind of manipulative field, or marketing, it's not because they have some special, part of their identity that makes them Machiavellian. I'm sure there's a tiny subset of people who are just 100% Machiavellian, and they're just like, I just love hurting people. But I think a lot of times it's people who are, talented at spinning a yarn, talented at creating an image, or creating,
good at making money from it,
a
as
narrative.
well.
Yeah, and if you're talented at it, and then you can parlay it into making money, it's like, that's why people do it. And I think, especially in the army, which I looked into a lot, sort of the history of psyops in the army, a lot of these people are actually quite idealistic. And the reason why I say that is because psyops are viewed as an alternative to kinetic warfare. So if you can persuade the enemy to not fight you, that's a win, because then hopefully nobody is killed, right? And so oftentimes you get these people who are in psyops who are like, hey, I'm trying to do diplomacy here. Like, I'm trying to get everyone to put down their weapons. And, oftentimes, of course, it's not effective, or the tools they've been given are incredibly bad, or they're underfunded, and it's just it doesn't work. But that is, in a sense, why it's like the kind of good guys in a certain way. It's like the people who are like, please, let's just talk about this. And maybe we'll talk about it in a kind of lying way. But at least we won't be chopping each other's heads off,
Right. Though, I mean, but then you do have the sort of culture wars aspect of it, where I think that's where it gets ugly, and people do it for often quite not for quite clout. Nefarious reasons, well, just thinking about the period I was looking at, I mean, Hitler didn't invent anti-Semitism or misogyny. Like, he just wanted power and was like, well, that is a thing that exists that I think could get more power for me. He didn't even necessarily buy into his own stuff, but it was useful. I mean, I do think that he was a hateful person, but in a way it was like, that just was what was around. If it had been like hatred of some other group, he'd have used that. It just, if it had made more sense to court one group over another, that's what it was about. It wasn't really about that he believed in it, but the hurting people didn't matter. It was like,
I don't know, maybe another group, like maybe immigrants. I don't know, just
like maybe immigrants,
maybe something currently
weird, or trans people. Strange. I know.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
So strange.
Yeah, so I guess I tend to shy away from the idea that there's certain exceptional people who are just evil. I think that, of course, there are a tiny number of people who, like, really, for whatever reason, they have mental health issues, or they're just, they just like watching other people be in pain, and in a non-consensual way. But I think what it really is that, especially right now, in the midst of a very devastating and pervasive culture war in the United States, all of us feel kind of called to participate, because I think many of us feel attacked, or we feel our friends and families are being attacked. And so it's very hard to resist that call. And and that's part of what I hope we can do. That's part of why I say psychological war, culture war have to have an end game, and they don't right now. They're forever wars. And we have to be able to say, if we can reach this kind of negotiating point, we're done with our culture war. And nobody's talking about that.
No. And I mean, and it's not like it's the first cultural war we've had. It's certainly it's certainly when we've had through, like, via TikTok and stuff like that. But so the means have changed, but the types of things that are happening are still frequently very much the same.
Although even, in your book, like, you talk about how they were using film. I mean, Hirschfeld was like, I love that movie, by the way. I'd like seen it like
but it's total, I mean, and he called it propaganda. He's like, we need positive propaganda to, like, outdo the negative propaganda.
And so in other words, like we've been having kind of TikTok battles since we had the moving pictures, so it's an ongoing issue.
Amanda says social media makes the culture wars seem more intense. And I think actually, I'm not even sure if intense is quite the right word. I think it's pervasive. We've come to rely on social media for so many different things. I'm an author. I have to be up there doing the things with the stuff. And I have curated a feed just about fountain pens. So that when I log into Blue Sky, it's just the fountain pen feed, so I don't accidentally see something horrible at 7 a.m.
My Instagram feed, because their algorithm is so sensitive, it only feeds me cooking noodles and black cats. Because I have black cats. So anytime I see black cats, I'm like. And so I'm like, great. Black cats and noodles are like totally my brand.
That works out well. Yeah. And Leanne was pointing out that domestic disinformation modes take on new forms with the changes over time. And as our modes of communication change, I have to say, so I know Twitter is bad and I left it. And Blue Sky is much better. But basically, I like this style of communication because I am autistic. My brain lives in like that many character compartments. I know I write really long books, but it's just like a bunch of those together.
So you're particularly vulnerable to that persuasion. Yeah,
exactly. So, I have to be very, very aware, and I'm a researcher, so it helps because of course I back check everything. But I think about that. I think about how it had been such a safe place for me. It can be really, really easy to be like, I'm safe here. And so I always, even though I really like Blue Sky, I also resist saying like, this is a safe place. It's not a safe space. Like you're not in a safe place.
I was talking to some folks the other day who build kind of social apps, and they were talking about how the old model, which by that they meant basically the Blue Sky model, the Facebook model, is kind of the yelling fire in a crowded theater model, where you're just a person yelling at a bunch of people. And now there's a trend toward basically cozy socials. So social apps or platforms that bring you together with a small number of people. So like Discord is a great example. Any kind of chat group that you're in, anything where it's a curated group of people that have shared norms oftentimes, or if they don't have shared norms, they have enough agreement that they kind of can come up with them and get rid of people who aren't participating in good faith.
The Facebook group for Peculiar Book Club.
Exactly. I mean, you're on Facebook, so there is a certain vulnerability to the giant theater of people yelling fire. But that is that's a great. That is part of it, is like kind of coming together with people you trust, and I think that's a really good antidote to a lot of the toxicity we've seen on social media. And also social media is a great, as people are saying, like it amplifies propaganda really well. It actually kind of weaponizes friendship, because your friends become a vector for a lot of these kinds of pieces of misinformation unwittingly. Like a lot of the time, like people will pass something on and they don't read it or they don't think about it.
Yeah, or they read the headline. They read the headline and then respond to the headline, and then you have people responding to the response, which happened to be recently.
And algorithmically, they're rewarded for that. And so we have again, it's like I'm so tired of people referring to these platforms as democratizing, because it's not democratizing if a corporation is using an algorithm to shape what you're seeing. That's just the same problem that we had with old-fashioned media, where an editor was controlling what you saw. It's okay, it's an algorithm now, which is in fact even more chaotic and kind of
it is, and it's
terrible.
Also you can't actually judge. It's very difficult to judge what it is. Like if it was an editor, you'd be like, okay, this editor, I know this editor is a bigot, therefore I know that, but it's hidden and it's messy, and it makes it really frustrating. Anthro Girl asks, who calls it democratizing? Often I was going to say often the people who are running it do.
It's rhetoric that I would say is kind of warmed over early 21st century rhetoric about how social media was going to level the playing field when it came to giving people access to getting their stories out there, getting their videos out there, right? That it would be flattening instead of having like a hierarchy with like an editor at the top and a bunch of other editors, and you have to kind of do gatekeeping. The idea is it's democratizing. There's no gate. You just go in and you post your video. And I think that might have been true for like 5 seconds in 2007 or something like that. But it's definitely not anymore.
For our podcast listeners, I'm going to say what's on the screen right here. Amanda Johnson says, if you guys like podcasts and nerdy stuff, you have to check out Annalee's with Charlie Jane Anders. Our opinions are correct. They make a lot of these connections there too. And Sureka jumps in to say, it's a really great show. And a nerdy Discord channel too.
Yes, I think there's probably the Venn diagram of like Peculiar Book Club and Our Opinions Are Correct is like, whatever. This is like me doing.
We should definitely like meet up. We should have a peculiar nerdy meetup
across like a multiverse, crossover event.
We do. That would be fun. So I just noted the time, and we have a very important thing that has to happen now because.
Yes.
Well, speaking of nerdy, I was just going to say, I believe George Lucas is quoted as saying that the Empire was the United States and the rebels were the Viet Cong. Remember, it was British, and it was the 70s.
That's right.
So when you think, yay, the rebels, we're not the rebels.
Yeah, no, it's really true. I mean, and I think people like really don't know that. It was I interviewed the filmmaker Boots Riley several months ago, and for the Believer magazine. You should go check it out because he's amazing. It was a great interview, and he was talking about that too. He's like, people don't realize what they're identifying with when they are seeing themselves in this story.
Mm-hmm.
So quiz time. So do you remember when you were on last time? Do you remember what we quizzed you about?
I don't remember. It was like, I'm sure I've like blocked it out because quizzes are always traumatizing.
I don't know.
My traumatic memories, no.
Since your last book was about lost cities, I did it about found cities or something like that. It was about your city and the other guest city, and it was questions about your hometowns.
Okay.
So the quiz this week, I was really caught by your story about the ghost dance. And it made me want to dig in and ask, are there other dances that have been banned or discouraged or, as the man tried to shut it down, basically. So we're calling this quiz this month, Everybody Footloose. Because they can't stop us from dancing. So not only was the ghost dance outlawed by the U.S. government, but they also went after other native and indigenous dances and ceremonies, including the sun dance, which is known as a physical and spiritual test that the dancers offer in sacrifice for their people. What makes it a physical test? That was physical and spiritual test. But what makes it a physical test? A, it's performed barefoot over hot coals. B, it's performed over many days without food or water. C, it's performed in the heat of summer wearing animal furs. What makes it a physical test?
And you can reach out to the Peculiars for help. They're often quite good. As a matter of fact, they're already throwing stuff up. Grace Harper says B. Oh, okay. Grace says B. Girl says B. All right. She's going with B too.
All right. I'm going with B because I love this community.
All right. They seem pretty set on this. The answer is yes, B. It's performed over many days without food or water. And if you can kind of see from the picture there's also a lot of body piercing involved. And I think sometimes the piercings, you're literally like attached to the pole in the middle through a piercing, and they kind of dance around the pole.
That is a common way to induce ecstasy.
Yeah, we learned a lot about this in our book about pain, didn't we? Peculiars. Yes, we're experts on this now. All right, Highland dancing is a direct shot at this specific part of English culture that was forced upon them. Is it A, wearing pants, B, drinking tea, or C, serving the monarchy? And I had a lot of fun of looking up lists of like, what's the most British thing? And most of it was like bad food and and saying words like cheeky and things like that.
Wow. I'm going to go with wearing pants because fuck pants.
Yeah. Who wants pants? Mindy says pants. A lot of people saying pants. 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 Please be A.
I mean, obviously, wearing pants and serving the monarchy are they're part of the same thing. Yeah,
They are. That's true.
The answer is yes. Wearing pants.
pants.
They banned kilts for a while. There was a period about 30 years, I think it was, where kilts were literally outlawed. So the dance literally involves shaking your leg as symbolism of shaking the pants off.
And also, do not wear underwear, because that is how to be properly regimental. And also, a lot of us just appreciate the show. So thank you very much.
You know, I bought Mark a
pleasures
kilt.
in life.
I just want to say, Mark
kilts.
has a kilt.
Yeah. All right. There you go. Yeah.
There we go.
It's funny how often authoritarian regimes ban particular types of clothing.
They do. Yeah. I do think that's funny that they banned the kilt, though, because I sort of feel like it's a piece of cloth, you know?
Yeah, but the colors symbolize your clan. It's like it's a way of showing allegiance to a different.
Do you know there is a witch's tartan now? Have you heard about this? They have created, in honor of all the witches who got burned, they decided to create them their own tartan. And I am just waiting for someone on Etsy to start making shit so I can buy shit. So yeah.
Yeah,
I do have a family tartan, but it is not attractive.
Yeah, we don't. Yeah, my family does not. I love plaid, very pro plaid, but there's no plaid in my family.
It did have to do a lot with warring clans and stuff like that. Yeah, it was a way to kind of suppress them. All right, question 3, your final question. By 1913, the Cedar Rapids City Council passed Ordinance 1019, banning the worst of the beastly jigs, including the bunny hug, the turkey trot, the Texas Tommy, and the blank. Was it the moose mash, the bison bop, or the grizzly bear? The beastly jigs that was outlawed.
Beastly jig. Okay.
Man,
wow.
I am so excited about beastly jigs. I guess I thought that the bunny hop was something that was supposed to be very wholesome, but I guess the bunny hug is different.
So the bunny hug looks like, I looked up all the videos of these dances. The bunny hug is like smushing your faces together and sticking your asses out and dancing. Like that's basically what the bunny hug is. The Texas Tommy,
I appreciate Daniel's idea that
it has to be A because you're here.
Yes. I wish it were the moose mash, because like I feel like the moose mash, you would be smushing your noses together, because moose have the softest noses in the animal kingdom. This has been proven by science.
What a
wow.
So yeah, I'm using my science voice, so you have to trust me. Everybody in comments is saying C.
Bunny hug is a hoodie.
Right.
It is. Bunny hugs are a hoodie. Thank you. There's one person from Saskatchewan representing. Also, the way you say underwear in Saskatchewan is gotch. So that's more information than you needed.
What if you don't gotch your gotches? What if you don't?
No, it's not gotches. It's gitch. Plural is gitch.
Gitch.
Oh,
I gotta go fold my gitch.
Yep. Hold on to your gitch.
My gitch is in the ditch. Me hearties. No wait, that's not Canadian. I don't know what that was.
That's not really a Saskatchewan accent.
No,
the bunny hug.
But it's nice. I like it.
Apparently, the bunny hug gets mentioned in the song "All That Jazz" in Chicago.
Wow.
I like that.
Oh, the dance.
All right, we're gonna need a final answer.
Okay, I'm gonna go with C because I just follow the crowd.
Yes, it is the grizzly bear. Yes, that was the other outlaw. The moose mash and the bison bop, unfortunately, are made up by me. They're not real dances.
It did sound pirate, Amanda. It did sound pirate, and I apologize for that.
They're all your kind of turn of the century, kind of Lindy Hop swing dance type thing.
Yeah, I was going to say Lindy Hop.
Yeah, they didn't want anybody getting too close. That's basically, boys and girls shouldn't be dancing that close.
Mm-hmm.
No, I want them to be real.
Girls and girls can dance that close, no problem.
That's
right. Yeah, sure. Which is always very funny to me. There is a great song about Saskatchewan pirates.
Yes.
Okay, so
and I am going to Bonnie, my first novel, Autonomous, has a giant quote from that song because it is about a Saskatchewan pirate. So check it out.
So I'm not a pirate. However, I probably will have to wear an eye patch. I apparently have to have a punch biopsy on my eye. So I don't know. Like that might revolve. I feel like I could rock that. I feel like that would be a sexy addition. Like, doesn't that sound terrible for your eye? I think that sounds terrible. I was like, I don't like the sound of that at all. No, I have a little cyst that they need to do whatever. But but they told me, they were like, yeah, we're gonna do an ocular punch biopsy, and I was like, none of those words together, I think, ever.
We also learned about lobotomies on this book.
Yeah.
We did a book
And the
about
guy
that.
who
too,
did
so,
them really fast, where he just stick like an ice pick up your nose and then whoop. I was like, hope it worked.
Or the guy who sucked the brain out of patient H. He was just like, I'll just give that up with a straw. And I didn't know it involved a straw and actual sucking. I mean, it sucked, but that's not what it's not how
that's not what Brandy's doing.
Not what I'm doing.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm doing. But I might have to wear an iPad.
I would demand the video just for fun,
But yeah, so I thought I don't know if there was any last questions that snuck in here that I missed, but we have come to the end of our show yet again, and we it flew by. It's a whole hour, but it never seems like a whole hour. And we got to talk about such amazing things with you, and I'm so glad you're here. And I even forgot to ask you about this wonderful bookcase behind your head. Is there anything that you want to show us off your bookcases? We do like show and tell.
Ooh, well, I can show you my next book, which is coming out in like 2 weeks.
Ooh, yes, let's do that.
Okay, here it is. I just got the hardbacks in.
Automatic Noodle.
Automatic Noodle. It's about robots opening their own noodle restaurant in post-war San Francisco, post-future war. And it has a lot about psyops in it. It actually has a whole subplot about psyops and coordinated inauthentic behavior online. This cover is so great. I don't know if you can see this.
That looks lovely.
Cute it is. There's like some of the robots, and then here's one of the other robots is an octopus robot. On the back. And Martha Wells liked it. Here's like Martha Wells saying nice things. She
very nice.
wrote Murderbot, which is a great show. You guys should all be watching the Murderbot TV show because it will just bring some. It is on Apple.
Okay.
And it is an incredible delight and actually very much a counter psyop because it has
very nice.
It has everything. Just check it out. Do you like robots? Yes. Do you like neurotic robots played by Alexander Skarsgård? Yes.
Skarsgård. Oh yeah.
Skarsgård. Yeah, he's really good at being robotic, shockingly enough. So
Skarsgård sounds like a pirate's name from Saskatchewan, possibly.
Yes. Well, and when he is Swedish, and so when he speaks with his American accent, he sounds like he's from Minnesota. It is wild.
Oh no.
It's so delightful.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, I have not tried any like robot I'm autistic. I feel like that would be a bridge too close.
So in Murderbot, that is actually one of the ways that it's dealing with being non-neurotypical, and like Murderbot's biggest problem is it hates eye contact. And so that's a huge subplot, and is like it's trying to get used to eye contact, and it's just like, oh, I don't know, so it's really good. Yeah. It's
Maybe
a good allegory for being neurospicy.
All of my fictions so far have been mysteries, though I am working on one right now, which is not a mystery, and it has the peculiar title of Taking the Dead in Your Mouth.
Ooh, that's an awesome title. Dang.
Thank you. Yeah. It kind of comes from the fact that
it has a peculiar title. I have no idea why it would be peculiar.
I know, it's so strange. It might have something maybe slightly to do with the time I was performing CPR on someone who died, but anyway, like it might be slightly more literal.
But it also has a good metaphorical power as well.
It does, which is important to the book that I'm trying to write right now, which is not a mystery. So my first fiction that's not a mystery. I will find out how this goes.
Congrats. Yeah, that's really cool. It's always fun to try a new genre.
Yeah. Or terrifying and awful. Yeah, it's one of those.
Again, with the Venn diagram. Here's me. I'm just going to keep going with my little Venn diagram. My Venn diagram hands, like there's jazz hands and then there's Venn diagram.
Oh my God, it's a dance. We do jazz first and then we do Venn diagram. Then we do close dancing with ladies.
Yeah. Okay, I'm ready.
And an octopus with the robot. Okay. That was a wonderful way to end the show. Thank you all for being here. And thank you, so Annalee. We hope you'll come back again soon and to a place where, if you're weird, you're family.
You got the blue bottle blues when you wake up in the night. Don't make a big mistake, 'cause you can never make it right when you read There is no